Hi, and welcome to the Anti-Waffle podcast with me, Em Belsham-Naylor, and Martha Gregorio de Souza.
Hello!
And together we'll try to talk about research without any gobbledygook. Each episode we'll be talking to a researcher who will discuss the work they're doing, looking at why this research is important, and asking how did they get into this field. We hope this will be informative and interesting and bring a bit of the academic world into the real world. This week we have Dr Kath Woolf at UCL. Hi.
Hi.
Thank you very much for talking to us.
Thanks for having me.
That's great, thank you. Do you want to start by telling us a bit about your research?
Yeah, so my research is about who becomes a doctor and who doesn't become a doctor and why.
Have they been through medical school and then or is it earlier than that?
So it's about getting into medical school, because nearly everybody who gets into medical school will become a doctor working in the NHS if they go to a UK medical school.
Yeah.
So that's really the point at which we find out whether or not somebody is going to become a doctor.
Yeah.
Is whether or not they get into medical school.
Ah, brilliant. So you're looking at what stops people from getting in. Is it that we get that there are a lot of applications but people just not getting in? And that's the case?
Yeah, so that's what we're looking at.
Yeah.
It's very competitive to get into medical school. Most medical schools only let in about a quarter of their applicants.
Right.
Although it does vary by medical school slightly.
Yeah.
So that's one of the things that we're interested in. So what we're interested in is which medical schools people choose to apply to.
Yeah.
Because you can apply to 4.
Right.
So you can put 4 down on your UCAS form, basically.
Right.
And we want to know, how do people decide which 4 of the 40-odd medical schools
I didn't even know there were 40-odd medical schools out there. Isn't that funny? I didn't even think of how many there were. I just always assumed that there's just this medical school somewhere in England, and I always assume London because I assume everything's in London.
Yeah. Well, there are quite a lot of them in London, but there are quite a lot outside London too.
Yeah.
Yeah, and so we want to know, whether or not people are choosing the right medical schools, the right combination of medical schools to help them get in. And in particular, whether there are systematic differences between people who come from, advantaged, privileged backgrounds, who are overrepresented in medicine anyway,
right,
compared to people who come from non-traditional or less traditional backgrounds who are obviously underrepresented in medicine.
Right.
Anyway, so we kind of want to figure out whether people are people from some groups are underrepresented partly because they're making the wrong choices, as it were, on their application forms. And what we're guessing, what we think, and what we're finding to be the case already is that people from less traditional backgrounds, so maybe they go to a school that doesn't really send anyone to medical school, they haven't got any doctors in their family, or they don't know any doctors, that kind of thing. None of their parents went to higher education or went to university. What we're finding is that they have less good information, essentially, about what choices to make to maximise their chances of getting a place.
As an outcome, are you looking at it just from UCL or at any medical school?
So any UK medical school.
Okay.
Yeah. So there's about 40 medical schools in the UK, and there are new ones this year as well. So that's really interesting.
Oh, wow.
Because they've got a remit to kind of broaden medicine out a bit to these non-traditional groups. So it's going to be interesting to see whether they're attracting applications from those groups and then letting them in.
Right, yeah. Or if they're just opening pretty much the same system but in a new building.
Exactly.
Yeah.
When did you start looking into this research?
So I'm in year 2 of a 3-year project. So we've been doing this particular project for a year. But I've spent like 2 years developing it.
Right.
So, but I've been working in medical education. So that's the kind of the study of medical students and doctors for 15 years.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
So you started when you were 5?
That's right. Yeah.
Have you found that there is this is what the person looks like, the stereotype of the kind of applications that get through?
So that's one of the things that we're going to be looking at. So what we've been doing up to now is interviewing applicants and successful applicants, so first year medical students from all over the country, from more and less traditional backgrounds. So it's quite interesting, actually. One of the things that we found is that it's quite difficult to define what non-traditional means.
Right.
Because you can be traditional and non-traditional in lots of different ways.
Right.
So, as I said, you can be the first person in your family to go to university, and that makes you non-traditional.
Yeah.
But if you are that person and you go to Eton... for whatever reason, and they're sending loads of people to medical school, then in that sense you're very traditional.
Right.
So there's multiple different ways in which people can be defined as more or less traditional.
Yeah.
So that's quite interesting to find out.
Mm-hmm.
And also medical schools now, there's, increasing pressure on universities and medical schools to increase the kind of diversity of the people who go to university and go to medical school. And so they've got various criteria that they will use to define people as coming from a widening participation or a widening access or a non-traditional. There's all these different words, background. And what we're doing at the moment is trying to find out how they all do it, because all of the medical schools do it differently. They all categorise people differently. All medical schools use different criteria for selecting people. And then they're all defining people as non-traditional or widening participation
I see, it's that bit.
in different ways.
Right.
So at one medical school, it might be that you need to live in a particular sort of area and be the first in your family to go to university.
Right.
Whereas in another medical school, they might say, well, you need to go to a sixth form that's got this particular level of general achievement. Right. Or another medical school might say, well, if you're a care leaver, then you'll be eligible for a reduced offer at A-level or something like that. So they're all doing it in different ways. Yeah. So if you're an applicant and you're thinking, which 4 of these 40 do I put down on my UCAS form? Right. It's really difficult to know because it's difficult to find out what medical schools are, how they're defining you, whether or not you're non-traditional.
Oh, right.
But also, they're all selecting people in different ways, so it's difficult to know, have I got the particular strengths and attributes that this particular medical school is looking for?
Right.
So it's a bit of a minefield, really.
Yeah.
So we're trying to make that clearer.
Right.
Yeah. And is that what you're hoping is an outcome of the research, is to make all this criteria clearer and the information for applicants clearer? Yeah.
That's right. So next year we'll be working with Medical Schools Council. So they're the representative body for UK medical schools.
Right.
And we'll be working with them to try and get information out to applicants about how medical schools are selecting.
Right.
Each individual medical school is selecting. So that they can make decisions.
Right.
And any other information they're interested in. So, from our interviews, we're hearing, for example, that students from black and minority ethnic backgrounds might really want to go somewhere that's got an ethnically diverse medical student body.
Right.
But how do you know if they do or not? If you're trying to choose...
Right.
How do you know whether they've got an ethnically diverse student body? Well, you have to go and visit them all.
Right.
How long is that going to take? How expensive is that? You look on the website, but how do you know that the pictures are accurate? So, but there are statistics that you could publish, that medical schools could publish, and then that would help people make more informed choices if that was something that was really important to them,
But what do we do for... Because if it was me, if I was applying for a medical school and I knew that it was, I was non-traditional...
Yeah.
I would not want the fact that I was non-traditional to be the thing that pushes me to which one I choose. Yeah. I wouldn't want that to be. I would want to be choosing the medical schools because, that's the top one, so I'm going to aim for the top one. Or I'm going to get... Which then, but if we look at reality, then that's going to reduce my chances of getting in, even though I think, I think I'm good if I'm good enough to be a doctor, I'm good enough to get into the top one. And so then I'm going to apply for the top ones, regardless of the fact that I'm from a non-traditional, because I'm expecting them to be judging me on my application, not on
your results,
not on my white male middle class background.
Yeah. So there's a few different things in there that you said that are really interesting, and absolutely, of course we want to be judged on our ability, on our aptitude, on our suitability to becoming a doctor. And I suppose there's a question about how, really important questions about, well, actually, how do we measure that? How do we know whether you've got the aptitude and the ability to become a good doctor? How do medical schools choose that? And, there is evidence that if you get 3 A's in A-level from a school where generally everyone gets 3 A's, that's not necessarily a particularly good indicator of your ability compared to if you get 3 A's at a school where everyone else gets 3 C's. So that might be one of the things that they would judge you on, what the average level of performance of your school was. And that enables them to judge your 3 A's more accurately. But do you know whether or not those medical schools are looking at the average performance of your school?
They're probably not, because...
Well, they might be. Some of them will be. And some of them won't be. But finding out which ones do and which ones don't is really hard.
And that's where your research comes in.
And if you're an applicant, then yes, you want to become a doctor. So you don't want to put 4 medical schools down on your UCAS form that mean you're not going to become a doctor. And, over half of the people who apply don't get in. So you don't want to be in that half. You want to be in the half that do get in,
exactly.
Presumably. So, and then you also said about getting into the top schools or the best schools, or what did you say?
The top ones, the best ones.
The best
medical school.
So what do you think is the best? What does best mean?
For me, best means that, I guess, the ones that everyone's heard of.
I'd say the most popular one.
The most popular one. And what, because, some universities have, went to Harvard, went to Oxford, went to Cambridge, and it's like, those are, it's like name dropping, and you can just say those names and everyone will know which would you know
school? Which was the top medical school in the UK?
I wouldn't. No. But if I was going to be a doctor, I wanted to get into medicine, then I would find out which was the top, because that's my field. And so it's like I'm into writing and acting, well, not acting, but filmmaking. And I know if I want to get an award, the award I want to get is an Oscar. Because that's my field. So whatever the field is, you know what your top award is, or what your top achievement or what your top attainment is.
So how do you know? And that's one of the other things that we're interested in, is what are people valuing in a medical school? So yes, prestige, which I think is what
that's
we're
the word,
about. Is something that's important to a lot of people. But there are bearing in mind, everyone who goes to medical school gets a job immediately afterwards in the NHS as a doctor.
Right.
So if you're considering, am I going to get a job? Then it doesn't matter what medical school you go to, you're going to get a job. But there are other things later on that might be influenced by the medical school that you go to. So, and we don't know particularly whether applicants are aware of these things or not. So that's something else that we're trying to find out. So some medical schools have great reputations for producing GPs, so family doctors. And that's really important for society, because we're short of GPs. We need more GPs. That everyone sees the GP all the time. We need a lot of them. And some medical schools produce hardly any GPs, and some medical schools produce absolutely loads of GPs. So if you're interested in becoming a GP, maybe you want to choose particular medical schools.
Going to produce the best one.
But also, it's competitive to get into specialties. So some medical schools, say Cambridge, will not have that many of their graduates applying for general practice, but pretty much everyone who applies will get into that training scheme. Whereas some people from other medical schools have half of their graduates will be applying to general practice, but not all of them get in. So it's actually quite complicated, you can have the some very prestigious medical schools like Oxford and Cambridge, their graduates will do very well post-graduation in pretty much whatever they do.
Yeah.
In terms of they take a lot of exams, doctors, and they, it's a competitive process to get into different specialties, and they will tend to come out at the top, graduates of those, whereas graduates from some other medical schools they come out much lower. And there are huge differences actually between medical schools and some of those, but we don't know whether applicants know about any of those, or whether they're just going, I've heard of it, or I've looked it up on some ranking website,
or I know someone who went there,
or my father went there, or it's my local one, or we actually have no idea, really. We're getting an idea now from this research that we're doing, but up to now we've had no idea how people are choosing medical schools, and it's really important because medical schools can only choose from the people who apply to them. They can only select those people. So, and it has a direct impact on who becomes a doctor and what kind of doctor people become. So it's really about shaping the UK medical workforce.
I think I'd thought that everybody trained as a GP to start off with, and that was the idea of a medical school. I'm not putting this in.
No, so what you do, you'll have 5 or 6 years, UCL is 6 years, but generally it's 5 years of medical school, and you'll learn everything. And you'll learn basic science, anatomy, histopathology, that stuff, and then you'll learn all the medical specialties from babies to, the elderly and all that. Then after that, you go and do 2 years of foundation training, and you'll rotate around different specialties. But you can't rotate around them all because there's so many of them. So you might do general practice as one of your rotations, but you might not. Accident and emergency, obstetrics, gynecology, surgery, various different sorts of internal medicine, paediatrics, all sorts of things. And then after that, you apply for specialist training. So your specialist training can be general practice. So you'll go and do 3 years of GP, and at the end of that, pass your exams and become a GP. Or you can go and do core medical training. And then after that, you go and specialise in some sort of internal medicine, so cardiology, gastroenterology, respiratory medicine, neurology, all these different ones. Or you go and do anaesthetics, or you go and do radiology, or you look at x-rays, or like all the different medical specialties that there are. So that's how it works. Okay. So it's really long. It's like 15 years of training.
It's crazy, isn't it?
And you've got to decide when you're 17 whether you want to do that or not.
You've got to really want to do it.
You've got to really want to do it. For reasons that I hope my research will help us understand, some medical schools produce certain sorts of doctors. So UCL produces a lot of hospital doctors doing internal medicine or surgery or obs and gynae or whatever it is. And we don't know why that is. Is it because people who are interested in those things come to UCL and they think this is a prestigious medical school, they do a lot of anatomy, they do a lot of science at the beginning, it's a traditional kind of course that's gonna, that's preparing me well for these sorts of this career path. And actually, whereas if I go to Keele or to Lancaster or something, there's a lot of early patient contact, so you're not spending your first 2 years only doing science pretty much. You're seeing a lot of patients and doing a lot of clinical stuff. There's a lot of practice on community, general practice, family medicine. And then they go off and are much more likely to go into that field. But we don't know whether it's because people are choosing those medical schools or because those medical schools are turning them into, GPs or what.
That's what you become familiar with.
So, and what you're exposed to, and, you get positive and negative experiences and, the way that specialties are talked about and the role models that you have and, all of that stuff.
And do you stay at that medical school throughout your training? Or do people move?
Yeah, so people will move.
Right.
So Yeah, so you stay at medical school for those 5 years, 5 or 6 years. Then you'll move for your foundation training.
Okay.
And then you can move again for your later training.
So you could make a decision based on your areas of interest into different medical schools after those initial 5, 6 years. Okay.
Yeah, you could. It's just that what you see is huge variability between medical schools.
What people go on to.
Yeah, so we don't know how much of that is to do with what's going on at medical school and what people are choosing. Do you see what I mean? What medical school?
Of their environment,
Yeah. And the only way you can find that out is by doing longitudinal research, where you follow people up over many, many years.
Right.
And you see what they were like at 17, and you see what they were interested in before they got to medical school. And then you follow them up.
Yeah.
And you can see, and that means that instead, because otherwise you can look at these people and say, well, they went to Lancaster and they're becoming a GP. But unless you know what they were like before they went to Lancaster,
right,
it doesn't tell you whether that was influenced
journey.
by the medical school. Yeah. So that's what we're trying to do, is set up this what's called a longitudinal cohort study, where you start it off age 17 and follow them all the way through their careers.
And how will you pick the 17-year-olds, the ones that...
So we want all of them.
Well, all of the ones who apply for medical school?
Yeah, this year. Ooh. So there's 20,000.
Well, good luck with that.
Thank you. So, yeah, we're sending a questionnaire out.
Get your kids in to help.
Yeah, that's right, licking envelopes.
Yeah.
So we're sending a questionnaire out this year.
Wow. And your research is 3 years? Though.
3 years, yeah.
So how are you going to follow this up for the end?
Yeah, so we'll have to get more money to follow them up, but we can follow them up what's called administratively. So through something called the UK Medical Education Database, called UK Med.
Yeah.
So I don't know if you're familiar with administrative data, but it's basically data that's routinely collected on you. So when you're employed at UCL, UCL collects data about you, what department you're in, how long you've been there, what your salary is, all that kind of jazz, whether you've been promoted. And they'll keep all those data somewhere.
Yeah.
And then if somebody wanted to, they could collect all of those data, anonymise them so you don't know who's who, and analyse them and see... do women stay longer at UCL than men, or whatever it is. Yeah. So they're not, those data are collected by HR for HR purposes,
right?
But you can use them for research. So they're collected for administrative reasons, but you can use them for research.
Yeah.
And there's the same with medical students and doctors. So once someone applies to medical school, their data goes into UK Med. Once they get into medical school, they will be followed up throughout the rest of their career administratively through the data that the medical school collects on them, what medical school they go to, how long it takes them to get through medical school, which foundation school they apply to, which specialties they apply to, whether or not they're successful, how they do in their exams, how long it takes them to become fully qualified. All of those data are collected and then anonymised, and then you can apply for them as a researcher.
Right.
So everyone who gets into medical school from my group of applicants this year, if they get in, then they'll be followed up anyway.
Right.
So I'll be able to see what happens to them.
So you're going to come back in 15 years and look at all that information?
Yeah.
Wow.
That's the plan.
That's cool.
Yeah.
That's amazing.
Yeah.
What's you going to do in between?
I've got loads of write up all the papers. Develop this tool, develop this information resource, see if it works.
And then you just do it all the time.
Yeah.
Here's the question then.
Yeah.
So you said when for all those who actually get in, so you'll capture all those who apply, and then all those who get in will be followed. What happens to those that don't get in? What will you do with that information?
So I would like to follow them up as well. So actually all university students are followed up. So not just medical students, but I don't know if you've ever seen those studies that they do on how much people who go to different universities and different courses earn. Have you seen that? If you do economics at the London School of Economics, then on average you're loaded
Right.
Is that what it says?
Yeah, basically, you know. So there are all these things that you can see.
I've seen a box loaded.
Yeah.
Okay, loaded.
I know, I'd love to tick that box.
Yeah.
That'd be good, wouldn't it? Sadly not. But so they get that information from seeing, you know, who goes into what course. Mm-hmm. How do they do in that course? So what kind of degree do they get? Do they get a first or a 2-1 or whatever?
Yeah.
Are they employed 6 months after graduation? Mm-hmm. If they are employed, how much are they earning? So they link it to HMRC tax records.
Right.
So then you can see if you're doing economics at LSE versus economics at somewhere else. Yeah. Or, you know, whatever it is. Doctors are all a bit funny because they all earn the same amount because they go into the NHS and the same amount. Yeah. So they're always at the top because they're all employed working at this level. So sorry, you asked me what will happen to those who don't get in. Yeah. So I'd like to be able to follow them up administratively as well. Yeah. Whether I can, the practicalities of getting those data a bit tricky. Right. But also I'm going to apply for more funding, research funding, to give people more questionnaires. Right. Because, you know, administrative data is great. It tells you what people are doing, but it doesn't tell you why. Right. So with the questionnaires, I want to find out why, you know, what are they interested in? What are they doing? What are they valuing? How are they feeling about themselves? Right. How, you know, all of this.
There must be a whole load of personal information that's influencing things that's not captured. Mm. And that would be a big influence, won't it, on people's decisions? Yeah. So, yeah.
Exactly. You know, if it's like, well, actually, my father died and, you know, like, you're not going to know that. No. Right. Or, you know, I had to be near home because of that. So that sort of thing. So I decided to go for the one nearest because I needed to be there as a carer for somebody. Exactly. You just wouldn't know that. No. So, or equally, you know, through administrative data, you don't know what people's career aspirations are. Right. When they're so we've been interviewing people, as I said, this year, and one of the things we ask them is, what are your future intentions, or what do you want to do after you graduate from medical school? Do you have any idea? And some of them are like, oh, I don't know, I just want to be a doctor and I'll find out. Some of them are like, I'd like to be a paediatric neurosurgeon, you know, or I'd like to go and work overseas in a developing country doing this, that and the other. Because actually I'm really interested in, you know, I had this experience and it really opened my eyes to, you know, and you just don't know any of that. Right. Until you actually...
The other end of the scale where, well, I want to be an actor, but my dad says,
my parents
says I haven't got to be a doctor. So it's just,
Exactly. So we don't know. That's a difficult one to measure. Yeah. But yeah, totally.
Oh, a huge project.
So it's massive, it's ginormous.
Is it just you in the team?
No, so I've got, thank God, no, it's, I've got postdoc, so Dave Harrison, who's working on the project, and I've got a PhD student, Elliot Rees, and we've got, other administrative staff. So, we've got William, who's trawling all the websites to see how medical schools define whether somebody or not is non-traditional. Pulling it off and putting it into a spreadsheet, you know.
Oh my gosh. Do you think at the other end of it all that there might be some uniformity in some of the criteria and how people are measured? Like whether it can be done sort of like numerically, I mean, to fairness and balance.
So I think it's very unlikely that it will ever be uniform. I think medical schools value their independence. Right. Medical schools like to have a different flavour. It's quite nice that you can choose a different sort of medical school. Yeah. They teach differently. They have, different sorts of staff and values and all that kind of thing. And I would say that's probably appropriate. Yeah. What I would like is for there to be more transparency. Right. So that's what I hope is going to come out of this, is that people will actually know what medical schools are doing.
Right. What they're about.
And be able to judge themselves against the criteria as well.
Right.
Because I think, if I said to you, well, actually, Martha, you go to this kind of school, and so if you apply to X medical school, you've got an increased chance of getting in, because they'll take that into account.
Yeah.
How do you know if you go to that kind of school?
Right.
How are you supposed to know? You just go, I just go to my school. Yeah, exactly. So, it'd be nice. And there are websites you can look things up on and stuff, but
when you're 17, who thinks of doing that?
Who thinks of it? Well, yeah. Unless you have someone who tells you that this is what you need to do.
Yeah. Because, of course, you'll tell your kids because you know.
Yeah, because I know, exactly.
Yeah.
And, if you go to a school that's used to getting people into medical school, then they'll know.
Yeah.
Because getting into medical school isn't just getting the right A-levels.
Right.
You have to take aptitude tests. So you have to take something what's now called UCAT.
Right.
Or BMAT. There are 2 different sorts of aptitude tests, depending on what sort of medical school you want to go to.
Wow.
Then medical schools have different work experience requirements. They have different sorts of interviews. Wow. So so Oxford and Cambridge will have that traditional, the Oxford and Cambridge panel interview. UCL has a panel interview where, you have 3 members of staff and you have to explain yourself to them. But increasingly, medical schools now are using something called a multiple mini interview, which is almost like a mini exam. And you have things that are called stations. So you'll have 5-minute tasks. So you'll have like 7 5-minute tasks.
Yeah.
And at each one, you'll be judged on how well you explain something to somebody, or do a practical task, or whatever it is.
Oh, I see.
Well, I prefer that to the panel. I like that in all my interviews. Go and do that. Okay.
Yeah.
I quite like that idea.
But you need to be able to prepare for that.
Yeah.
Because, it probably isn't something you've done before.
Right, no. I don't do it that way.
So if you've got a school that knows, well, actually, if you apply there, it's going to have this kind of MMI. They're all different, the sorts of MMIs that they do. This is how you're going to prepare. This is what we're going to do. If you don't have any of that, the odds are really stacked against you. And it's unfair, I think.
Yeah.
Because you could be really good.
Yeah.
And just be unlucky.
Yeah, just get the wrong kind of interview that doesn't fit your style. Yeah, that's not fair.
Or just not know and come in unprepared.
Yeah. Because wouldn't it be in the university's interest to be as open as possible? Because then they'll get in, not just getting, because of course they're filling, but getting the right people that they want.
Yes.
Surely, because if they're putting those kind of tests out there, then they want the kind of people who will respond well to those tests, because that's the tackle, that's the bait they're putting on their line. Yeah. So surely they should be making that open and, look, this is the thing, if this is the sort of environment that will suit you, come and apply, because this is our environment and we want people who will be suited. Otherwise, they're going to have lots of people who don't fit into that, who fit into the panel situation, but we're not a panel kind of university, so we want people who are like us, because then the first hurdle is out of the way, because, well, we're all on the same page, this is the way we like to work, we haven't got to train you to think the way we think.
Yes, I think that is true. I think, though, that a lot of medical schools are, because they aren't very diverse, actually, and, you've got to think that what are medical schools doing? Well, they're training people to be doctors. Yeah. And who are doctors caring for? Everybody.
Yeah.
So actually, there's an argument that you need that diversity in the population of doctors in the medical workforce to be able to care for, all sorts of different people.
Yeah.
So yes, I think medical schools will sometimes say, we want, we're going to have this kind of selection process.
Yeah.
These kinds of tests, these kinds of interviews, and we're going to get people who are just like us.
Yeah.
And actually, we're not very diverse.
Yeah.
So I think that can be also quite problematic, potentially.
But you have people who think like that regardless of the race or class or... Yeah, so you can have like pockets of people who think the same way, sort of thing.
Yeah, no, definitely. And that's why I think that it's good to have different sorts of medical schools.
Yeah.
I think that's it's good to have that kind of diversity as well. Yeah. But also I think that because the traditional way that things have been done is that, there'll be most people who come to medical school, or a good proportion of them, will have gone to highly selective schools, private schools or grammar schools. A lot of them, obviously, their parents are doctors.
Yeah.
Vast majority of their parents are university graduates.
Yeah.
It's actually not very representative at all.
Right.
And you want your doctor to be competent and good and caring and all the rest of it, but you don't want people to be excluded from being able to be a doctor simply because they didn't go to a school that's used to getting people into medical school.
Yeah.
So how did you get into this area of research? What's your background to lead up to this point? So
my background is not in medicine. So I did a psychology degree because essentially I'm interested in why people do things. So why people go to medical school is one aspect of why people do things.
Why would you give it 15 years if you like?
And I'm interested in why some people do well and other people do not do well. So that's essentially what I've always been interested in. So I kind of came into medical education by chance. I did my psychology degree. I did, when you do a degree, often you'll do a third year dissertation or a third year project.
Yeah.
So I did mine on musical savants, so people with savant syndrome who have low levels of general intelligence but have an amazing ability in a particular area. So I was interested in people who had amazing musical ability. Yeah. And they were all blind as well, actually, the people that I was working with. So it's totally fascinating, brilliant, loved it. And then after I graduated, the professor who was supervising me said, I've got a bit of money, you can carry on doing a bit of research, but it's not very much money, Yeah. So she gave me my first research job at Goldsmiths, University of London. And I really liked it. It was part-time. I needed something else to do. So a friend of mine was working for an MP in Westminster. Yeah. So in this kind of... not nepotistic because we're not related, but one of these, the right people. Yeah. She got me an internship. In Westminster, and then I got a job working for an MP. Mm-hmm. So I was doing that half the time, and then half the time doing the research. Yeah. And I really enjoyed both of them, but I really enjoyed the research. Yeah. So, but the money had run out, or was about to run out, for this job in Goldsmiths. So I did that really annoying thing where I wrote an email and sent it to everyone. So I sent it to everyone in every psychology department in all of the colleges of the University of London, which included UCL at the time. And I just said, this is me, will you give me a job? And I think 3 people got back to me. Sarah Jane Blakemore was one of the people who got back to me. Yeah. She bought me a coffee and gave me career advice. I don't think she had a job for me, but she was really super nice. And then somebody who I hadn't even emailed, who's called Inam Hack, was working at the medical school here at UCL. And he said, I've got your email. Do you want to come in for a chat? I might have a job. Oh, cool. And someone had kind of forwarded my email to somebody who had forwarded it to somebody else. So it's totally random in that sense. And and then he gave me a job. And then he was actually interested in finding out why we see ethnic... Well, were they there in the first place? So he'd noticed that the people who were failing medical school exams, when you looked at their names, they tended to have names that weren't traditionally kind of white Anglo-Saxon British. Right. And so he wanted to know whether this was just a real observation, were there real differences there? And, what we should do about it. So he gave me a job doing that. Right. And I got really interested in it, and I ended up doing my PhD on that topic, on ethnic differences in attainment. Right. There's now called the BME attainment gap. I don't know if there's something, it's a thing in universities. So I've really actually spent my academic career looking at that and trying to first finding out that yes, this is a thing.
Yeah.
Then finding out what the problems are, why we see this, and now what we can do about it.
Yeah.
And so it's kind of related to the work that I'm doing at the moment, but the work I'm doing at the moment is a step before, because I'm looking at people before they get to medical school now, whereas up to now I've been looking at people once they're at medical school or after medical school.
Right.
But ultimately I'm interested in why you see differences between groups of people in their achievement.
Right.
If the public wanted to get involved or find out more about your project, is there a way to do that?
Yeah, so we've got a website for our project. It's a WordPress website.
So is ours.
So it's got WordPress in the title, but the project is UK Max. So it's the UK Medical Applicant Cohort Study. It's just ukmax.wordpress.com. And we're on Twitter as well, UKMax1.
Excellent.
And we do have we call them expert, or sometimes they're called lay advisors on our research as well. So we're always interested in hearing what members of the public think of our research and what we should be doing.
Excellent.
Yeah. Cool. What I said about the other work that I've been doing to date on ethnic differences, that's still very much ongoing.
Right.
And it's really, I think we're at a very interesting point where medical schools and universities generally care and know about these ethnic differences and are actually trying to make education fairer.
Right.
And get rid of these differences that we see. So, we're doing a lot of work on that at the moment. Yeah. So, I suppose I want to say that as well. Yeah, because I think it's really important, and I think that more people need to know about it.
Yeah. So, and the big ships take a long time to turn. So.
They do, but they are starting to turn now, actually. Yeah. So it's really good. Yeah. So Universities UK, who represent all the universities and the National Union of Students, the NUS, they launched a project on this last year, and it's chaired by Baroness Amos, who I think is the only Black Vice Chancellor.
Oh wow!
So she's the director of SOAS.
Yeah.
And the medical schools are really on board, and it's been going on in. There's been a lot of work in postgraduate medicine, so that bit, foundation and specialty training, has been going on for quite a long time.
Right.
There's a lot of work being done on that. So hopefully we'll start to see some differences. Yes. Actually, some change actually happening.
Yeah,
that's exciting.
It starts showing up in the statistics as well.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. That's what we want.
Yeah.
And then we'll do another podcast in 15 years again and get your results.
Yeah!
We'll book it.
Yeah, thanks.
Thank you very much for your time, and thank you to everybody for listening. We'll put up all the links that have been mentioned on our website, and our website is antiwafflepodcast.wordpress.com, and our Twitter account, which is antiwafflepod. Please do get in touch because we'd love to hear from you. Bye.
Bye.
Bye.